Scanning for audio.
Radio from Garrow.
Welcome to a Tin Dog podcast, the first of our Whooverville interviews. Yes, part of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance does have its perks. Over the next few weeks, you'll experience interviews from the podcast panel and some other audio that I've managed to get hold of. As always, a massive thanks to Steve Hatcher and all at Whooverville for organising such a brilliant convention, and I hope that this gives you a taste of what it was like. This time, interviewing JanetFielding, Michael Keating and Mike Tucker, interviewed by myself. That's Michael from the Tin Dog Podcast, or as I'm also known, at Tin Dog Podcast, all one word on Twitter. And of course, the inimitable Tim Drury of Tim's Take On Podcast. So enough from me. Over to some familiar voices at Whooverville. Hello, this is the podcast panel. My name is Michael. I'm the host of the Tin Dog Podcast. This is...
I'm Tim, who does the appropriately named Tim's Take On Podcast.
Okay, we are completely harmless. However, you are the guests.
Thank you.
For the audio, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
My name's Michael Keating, and I was in Blake 7.
I'm not Michael Keating, I was never in Blake 7.
I'm also Michael Keating, and I was in Blake 7.
Oh, I'm glad you got that sorted. Marvellous.
Sorry. JanetFielding, Tegan in Doctor Who.
Michael Keating, I think I was in Blake 7.
And Mike Tucker, special effects designer on Doctor Who, Red Dwarf, and other programmes. Not Blake 7.
Not Blake 7, right. So, yeah, the sort of Blake 7, not Blake 7, it's fine. We all know, we're all amongst friends.
Uh-huh.
We are apparently so. Now, can I start off with a tiny question for Janet? It's all right. Trust me, we are indeed harmless. Right. Now, you didn't want to do any Big Finish for a while.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you did. What changed your mind? Was it us banging on your door, or did people twist?
No, what happened was Gary Russell, who was then producing and script editing and whatever, every time I saw him, he would hassle me to do it. And I found out he was leaving, so I figured it was safe to go in, as it were. and I agreed to do his final one, his final story, in which I believe he killed me off, little devil. Gave me a fatal disease, anyway.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty awful.
We won't go into
Well, I did say I'll do one. I said I'll do one and that's it. But actually, I hadn't seen Pete for a while. I used to see him a lot when I was an agent because we were both members of the Soho House, and Peter was doing a lot in the West End. So, and I was an agent at the time, so I was in there a lot as well. And I hadn't seen him for a little while, and I hadn't seen Sarah for ages, so I agreed to do it. And then that turned out to be a lot of fun, and the food is fantastic.
As we heard.
Yeah, which, as you hear, ad infinitum, but really it's one of the best restaurants I've ever been to. So, it was such fun to do.
Did you get the bug then? You thought, haven't acted for a while, forgotten how much fun it can be?
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of. You mentioned in that last bit that Tegan got a terminal disease in that one story. I always assumed it was because you just said you'll just do the one.
Yeah,
and
that's right. And he was trying to make sure I didn't do any more, which I thought was pretty bloody mean, actually.
So I thought it was your call. That was what I was thinking. No.
Cheeky sod.
Terribly sorry about that. I just wanted to say that it's kind of a bit weird me being here because as a child my first ever crush was on Tegan. I wanted to be Villa, and the job that I wanted was yours. So being here is kind of a bit strange for me, so just bear with me if it all goes horribly strange.
It's going to make me feel horribly superfluous.
No, in that case, Tim, take over, please. I'll just sit here and swoon.
Oh no, can't have that. Well, Michael, you've worked on television for a long time, which is a compliment, not an insult, by the way. Villa's among my favourite characters in Blake 7, partly because he's an abject coward, and also
He's
because
careful.
he's careful. That's what I always think.
Yeah.
Everyone else is going, let's go down to this planet, and he's going, but don't kill us. He's indispensable because he's the guy that can open doors for them, but also he's the comedy relief.
Hopefully.
Which is, I think, why I fell in love with with your character, because everyone else would be, we've got to kill this person this week and blow up this enemy base this week, and we'll go down to the planet now. And Villa will be sat in the background slowly getting drunk and going, no, I think we'll go in about half an hour or something.
Yeah.
And so was that particularly fun to be the difference
It was
in amongst
a lovely
all that?
part. I enjoyed it very much. It sort of developed, I guess, as they do, don't they, when you do something where we start off, with 2 scripts and wonder where we're going with it. But there we are. That's like life, isn't it? Where are we going? But I think we got there eventually.
And you've now got old enough to play Vickers.
Yes,
Because
I'm hoping for
I'm an old viewer of EastEnders, and I can't remember when you first got this role, but a couple of years back, something came up in EastEnders. Someone was getting married, or there was a funeral, or something. Yes. And so you're watching EastEnders as normal, and the camera tracks in, and you suddenly decide to go, who's playing that vicar?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's Michael Keating. And I got to my brother, Michael Keating's in EastEnders tonight.
Yes.
And it then became a sort of retainer type role for you, and every
It
so
seems
often
to
they'd
be.
have you
I'm
back.
doing a few more in a few weeks' time.
And there was one a few months back where they had another vicar in, and I thought, this is not right.
I don't know. I may have been doing something else.
It may have been Blake 7ing for Big Finish or something that week, or whatever.
It comes and goes.
They haven't moved EastEnders up to Salford then.
No, not yet.
They tried to move it to the Olympic Park, because when the Olympic Park all started dissipating and they were trying to, what do we do with all these venues and what have you, the BBC were petitioned to move EastEnders to the broadcast centre at the Olympic Park and have the set there instead.
Yeah.
Presumably the only thinking being, hey, it's EastEnders, let's make it in East London.
Yeah.
And that all fell through, and the building went to BT Sport,
Yes.
who presumably didn't have to do anywhere near as much with the building, because it was effectively set up already for them.
Yeah. But it's an interesting job. It comes and goes, and I got it because I was playing Scrooge. People said it was the nearest to my own character.
Quite a different role.
And actually Dickens does have a connection with my family, because my dad was, I'm really going off the beaten track, my dad was a printer, and his first job was for Sir Robert Carr. You're a bit young to remember him. He was also an MP, and Carr's family ran Carr's blacking factory in Victorian times, and that's where Charles Dickens first started work as a boy.
Yes.
That's the only connection. But I did play Scrooge, and that led, because the lady who was the production manager on the production and myself both had a row with the director, who was losing it a bit. I don't normally have a row with directors at all, not a great idea. And it bonded us, and she became a casting director eventually at the BBC and kept sending me up for stuff for EastEnders, Thugs, you name it, Ronnie Cray or whatever. And eventually she said, well, there's this vicar, do you want to go up for it? And I got it, so I've been doing it nearly 10 years, on and off. I mean, I do about 2 or 3 episodes a year, but I've got a few coming up now. As usual, you never see the script, do you, till the last minute.
Who was the casting director?
Do you know, I can't remember her name, isn't it terrible? She I haven't seen her since. I can't remember her name. She was, as I say, company manager on it, but she became a casting director and put me up for various things. And
as the vicar, you get to do location filming, which a lot of the cast don't get to do.
Elstree, do a lot. Well, near Elstree churches around there, and I worked with the lovely Dot in it, June Brown,
Who's
who
a bit of a legend in her own.
well, in her own
lunchtime.
lunchtime, yes. I first saw her. I said to her, I first saw you in a play called Life Price at the Royal Court. Not a very nice subject, it was about child abuse, but it was 1969 and she was in it, and I thought she was fantastic in it. And she said, well, you've got a very good memory. I said, it's the last time I went to the theatre. She's a lovely lady. She's practically 20 years to the day older than I am, so she'll be 90 next year. I'll be 70, so there we are. Both Aquarians.
My brother is a scary level of expert on EastEnders, and I was thinking, oh, Dot's been in it since day one, and my brother will go, no, she's been in it since da-da-da.
That's
I know
right,
exactly when she joined. But
Tim, we're Doctor Who fans. We know far too much about TV to begin with.
yeah,
Saying that, I've got a brother who knows a bit about
this is true, but she started off in that role as kind of like upper middle age playing a pensioner, and now is a pensioner just playing herself effectively to a degree.
Yes, she's a lovely lady.
Must be great to work with.
Yeah.
Janet, there's some. Right, first off, I must say, nobody here, and I'm going to get us all to promise, no one here is going to ask you to do the Mara laugh. Okay? No one.
I'm not armed.
She's not armed. She's not going to do it. There's obviously some fan myths connected with you saying, I don't want to do this. But the big one, it's all right, don't worry, I'm trying to put you at ease, is that you sort of said to Paul McGann, don't do Doctor Who, when you were the agent. Or did you put him forward for it? We just don't know the truth.
I can't remember whether I put him forward for it. I don't think he was particularly put forward for it. I'm not sure. I think that even before they started, they approached us and asked would he come in and talk to them about it. So, he was one of the names that was always in the mix, as it were. Yeah. And I did say to him when he was taking on the role to be aware of what it meant and what it would mean further down the line. So it will never leave you, kind of thing. Only death will separate you from it. I am sure that I could, emigrate to somewhere like in a remote region of Gambon or whatever. Not the actor, you understand. I meant the country, which is having troubles at the moment. And somebody there would be a Doctor Who fan, because that's the way it is. But,
And we are going to talk to Mike in a minute.
You're going to talk to Mike? He's sitting there patiently.
I will, but I was about to say to you, has your exposure to fandom helped with Project Motormouth? But if you want to talk about Motormouth later, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, hugely. So, because I don't do many of these. I think the last one I did was about 18 months ago in the UK. And because otherwise you get bored with your own stories. And, you don't want to do that. So I don't do a lot of them. I didn't do any when I was running Women in Film and then an agent. That just thought that was wildly inappropriate. But when I got cancer, Peter Davison came down to see me and said, what can we do? And I said, well, funny you should mention that, because I've started this charity and blah, blah, blah. And that was how the whole Project Motormouth came up, because everybody in the town, it's called Project Motor House, the development, but everybody in the town, for some unknown reason, calls it Project Motormouth. And so I said, well, my character was the mouth on legs, so it makes sense to call it Project Motormouth, these fan conventions. And let's just do... Initially, it was just one. And this is this huge multi-million-pound development, and the idea is that we become property developers, and we develop this derelict site on the front at Ramsgate, which holds up the main road into Ramsgate and the promenade. And Ramsgate is completely starved of investment because everything's going to Margate. Everything is going to Margate. It's really annoying. And so the idea was we develop this site and use the rent from that site to then subsidise youth work in the town, because, there's a lot of deprivation in the area, and there's damn all youth work left. You know, everything's been cut so drastically. This government has cut the money going to local councils by so much. It's really terrible, you know. On the one hand, we're all for localism, and then on the other hand, but let's make sure they don't have any money to do any localism with it. Do you know what I mean? So
how's it going? Is it going well?
Yeah, well, I think so.
Okay. Well,
we're doing this huge youth project at the moment, which is going really
okay,
well.
but-
And in fact, I've just been talking to Mike Tucker about perhaps doing a youth project with Mike, you know, which I could get Mike involved with. So yeah.
right. We have ignored you, Mike. I apologise.
You have. That's
have.
really bad.
Thanks for the intro there.
Yeah.
What have you been buttonholed into then?
Well, we were just chatting this morning. I mean, that's the lovely thing whenever you do these conventions. You bump into people that you haven't seen for, in some cases, years on end. And when you go, what are you doing at the moment? It's suddenly, oh, well, I could probably help with that. But because we're not seeing each other on a sort of week-by-week basis, it doesn't always enter your head of course, I've got this fantastic contacts list that we've all built up through the convention circuit. So we'll talk and we'll see if something can come together.
I have to go out and raise the money.
Yeah. You have to get it from somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, just for the record, all of the podcasts that are being recorded here today are heard throughout the world. So how can everyone around the world help? Is there an email address?
You go to www.projectmotorhouse.org.uk, I tell a lie, and you can donate,
Okay.
because we're a registered charity.
Right. Okay, I shall now ask Mike my prepared question. Mike, you wear two hats. You've got your writer's hat and you've got your model making hat. How do you balance them both?
The effects work when I was at the BBC was regular. It was a full-time paid job in the BBC Special Effects department. When that closed, you become freelance, and as anyone who works in the freelance entertainment industry knows, the work is either so busy that you can't move or nothing at all. And so the writing, basically for me, comes into those gaps where I'm not busy. It's one of the things that I fell into with the behind-the-scenes work, and this behind-the-scenes book I did with Sophie. And then once you started doing the fiction, it's like, okay, well, I've just finished, X weeks on Red Dwarf, but I've got 3 months before the next project starts up. That's the gap in which I'm going to try and fit the writing in. Of course, it never works like that, and the writing deadlines come along when I'm busy with the effects work at the same time. But that's what I try and do, is try and juggle these two things separately. And the writing is something that you can do if you're on location and stuck in a hotel room. As long as you've got a laptop or a pen and paper, you can write. So I have been able to juggle the two quite successfully. The gaps between the effects work, if they're long, you can take on a big project. If they're short, you take on a short project. But I don't pretend to be a full-time writer, and certainly people who turn around to me and go, we've got this project, can you turn around? A very good friend of mine, Mark Morris, for example, he's just been given a novelisation job of a Hollywood film, and I think he had to do an 80,000 word book in 5 weeks. But
that was a challenge?
Just a little. So I'd have to turn something like that down. That would physically be impossible. So I tend to sort of say things like,
terrible.
well, if I can do it for the end of the year, I can fit that in.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to constantly fit one in round the other.
You spent a lot of time with the BBC model department. How did you get in?
I wrote to them and said, can I get a job with you? And they went, yes, do these O-levels, do these A-levels, get this college degree, and you'll come on board as what we call a holiday relief assistant. So you do your first 2 weeks for the BBC unpaid, so they can work out whether you're any good or not. And at the end of that, they say, right, there's a 3-month contract for you, and we will train you up in pyrotechnics and smoke and studios. And it was a proper apprenticeship scheme. So I joined the BBC aged 20. I was trained by the BBC in-house effects department. I did things like Top of the Pops and Tomorrow's World, and you were taught the etiquette of a television studio, what not to do. Do not sit on any furniture, wear soft-soled shoes, do not play any musical instruments. That used to be the sign that I saw. If there was a TV studio, do not play any musical instruments.
I don't remember
Big
that.
sign on the wall. This is where blue assembly T-bar is,
Yeah.
red assembly
Yeah.
T-bar. Oh,
The
this is
crush
the
bars.
BBC Club.
Yeah.
You need to become a member of that. So yeah, it was a very old-fashioned system, a very rep company system. It changed under John Burt and Producer Choice, but I very much joined the old BBC system and was trained by them. And it's funny because when I went freelance and set up my own company in 2005, I thought, well, that's it. I'm free of the BBC now. But do you know what? I still use their risk assessment forms for shows. I still use their sort of purchasing layouts, because what they taught me was how to do it properly.
Yeah.
And it might seem long-winded, but it actually forces you to do the job the correct way, and it informs how I now still do it for my own company. So the Beeb's always going to be with me, I think, from that point of view.
For a short period of time, everyone, all of the producers and directors you would come across would say, right, we'll do this with a computer, and all of the effects people would go,
Yeah.
right, we've got all this technology, but we've also got this expertise. Can we use the expertise instead? Have things swung back?
They're
a lot?
swinging back.
They're swinging back.
They're swinging.
Why is that?
The computer was a new shiny toy, and everyone wants the new shiny toy. Producers and directors and publicity people wanted to be able to say our film uses state-of-the-art CGI, regardless of how it was being done. And George Lucas, when he did his Star Wars prequels, it was all about, we're using CGI, we don't have to do it the old way anymore. And then you've got directors like Chris Nolan, who do things like the Batman Dark Knight trilogy and Inception and Interstellar, who goes, but these old techniques have been around for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and they work really well. Why don't we combine them with the new technologies? And that's what we're in. And
Did he use model work in Inception? Inception's the one where the images bend upwards all the time, isn't it?
That's right. So all the bending cities are all CG, but the hospital that explodes and collapses at the end is all miniature.
That's a model shot.
And in Interstellar, the spacecraft is a miniature. Huge miniature. And then things like the new Star Wars film, the little robot, BB-8, little spherical robot. Okay, the puppeteers are being removed from the image digitally, but the actors are still acting against a puppet.
There's still a performance.
So it's performance.
Yeah.
And again, you go back and watch some of the Star Wars prequels with Ewan McGregor, and he's acting against nothing in a green room, and you can tell he's bored. There's nothing to bounce off.
Yeah.
So I think that we must use this new technology has been tempered a little bit with, are we getting a good result from using this technology? And if you're not, it's the wrong technology. I mean, famously, George Lucas, when he was doing the last Indiana Jones film, they wanted to get Harrison Ford and Sean Connery back in, and they said, oh, well, we can't get the two of them together at the same time, their schedules don't clash. And George Lucas went, well, we'll film Harrison one week and we'll film Sean the next and we'll put it together afterwards. And it was Spielberg went, why would you want two of the best actors in the world and not have them in the same room together? That's what you want, is their interaction. If we can't get them together, let's not do it.
But that's interesting because, sorry to take
please,
over.
that's what this is about. Go for it.
Because at breakfast this morning we were talking about the way that everything had gone over to digital and now it's coming back to film. And it's interesting, we've just been doing this big photographic project with some kids in Ramsgate, and they could have used fully automated cameras. They didn't want to. They wanted to learn how to focus and how to do. And I mean, there wasn't actually time or the ability to teach them how to develop film, but they actually really wanted to use film. But of course, you can't mesh that with the digital, and we wanted to put a load of stuff up online and all that kind of stuff so that there could be learning materials. But it's really interesting that
again, we talked at breakfast the fact that you can now go and buy a piece of music on vinyl.
Yeah.
And I on Six Music the other day was saying that there's a band and they're about to release their album and it's going to be on CD, album, and cassette. So a cassette's about to come back.
But that cassettes I don't understand. Because, I mean, we all remember that endless spiel of a cassette as it came out, as it got caught.
Put a pencil in to
And
try
putting
and wind it back
to
in.
tighten it. Yeah.
But they've just stopped. I think the last factory in Japan to manufacture VHS players have just stopped manufacturing VHS.
VHS still around.
Yeah.
But VHS does deteriorate.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've
you know,
still got a VHS machine because I've got some things that are only on VHS tapes, and I pray that the thing never goes wrong because I might not ever be able
Yeah.
to replace it now.
Well, I'm told that cassette is back because people like to be able to do mixtapes and hand them to their friends, which is tricky to do.
you can't do it digitally.
Yeah,
Well, you
or
can,
you
but
can
it's
do
yeah.
CDs.
But wait a minute. Doesn't VHS deteriorate over time?
Yes.
We were always told that 10 years is the life of a
But then
VHS.
so
I've got
do
my
DVDs.
oldest off-air cassette, which is 1985.
And you can still play it?
It's still playable, but it doesn't play as well as it did in 1985. But it definitely still plays.
Really?
You'd be
I am
surprised. I mean,
gobsmacked.
the restoration people have done wonders with old 1980s studio tapes, but looked at raw, they still look pretty good. But I wanted to pick up on what you said about the CGI versus model thing, because I noticed a few years back there was at least one series of Red Dwarf where they went through the thing you just mentioned of someone going, okay, CGI, and pretty much everything in that series of Red Dwarf was done CGI, but it was done CGI on a Red Dwarf budget, and so it wasn't remotely as good as it could look. It was as good as the budget could stretch to, and so you watched it, and every time an effect happened you went, yeah, that's CGI, we can see that's an effect going on there, and it kind of pulled you out of it a bit. And
It'll date quickly.
have you
Well, then why?
Because
Yeah.
the programs you're using in 1985, 86, 87 did not have the sophistication that a program now has. Whereas if you build a big model and film it on 35mm, some of the stuff that Ian Scoons did for your first
Yes,
series
indeed.
of Blake 7, Michael,
Yes.
still stands up today
Yes,
because
yeah.
the models are big, they're beautifully made, they're shot on 35mm.
Yeah.
It looks gorgeous.
Listen, tomorrow is that burning of that huge model in London, which is 37 metres long.
Great fire.
The Great Fire, the one that's been built on the...
we've paid for out of an arts grant?
Yeah, I know. How much did it cost?
I'd rather not know.
I'd love to know.
Yeah.
I mean, that is dazzling. It is dazzling. That's going to be
Yeah,
amazing.
it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Have you got any work on the newer Red Dwarfs they've been doing the past couple of years?
Yes, we've just finished. We filmed in the summer. We had a 2-week shoot using models, but models and green screen and some CG we've blended, and it's what
Whatever
I'm
works
saying.
best.
And there's a
It's
few clips
blends
now
the
doing the
technique.
rounds.
So yes, we've used the best things that models can do, and we've used the best things that CG can do, and we have something that hopefully will look modern.
Well, I-
Yes, the first episode going out on the 22nd of September, I think, has got some of our stuff in it.
What I've always liked about model stuff is when it's done particularly well, it really does work, because it is something that's physically there and it is three-dimensional, whereas a computer's always desperately trying to simulate 3 dimensions. You've got it in an object.
And the laws of physics work on something real, whereas in the computer you can decide to turn off the laws of physics. Let's make it move slightly faster, let's change the trajectory. And your brain has been hardwired over the years. That's how we know how to catch a tennis ball that's been thrown at you. You work all that maths out in your head, so if somebody mucks about with it in the computer and changes the way it looks, you know you're watching something
and
fake.
there was a period of time when people said, we don't need to set a model on fire, we'll get the computer to simulate fire. Whereas you set a model on fire, it's something that's on fire, and it's fire that behaves the way that fire does.
You have to pull all that behaviour from your brain, and you can't.
Oh yeah.
But the same is true of fully CG characters, and I don't know whether you've impacted on this. And where I'm based at Ealing Studios, we have, as part of the unit there, Andy Serkis's motion capture company, the Imaginarium, and instead of having animators animating a CG character, they're putting a performer in a suit, they're putting dots all over their faces and their bodies, and we're creating all the movement and the performance driven by
A person.
people who know how to do it, i.e. actors.
It's a thing the Oscars haven't caught up with, because there's been some amazing performances through motion capture, and I'm a big listener to Mark Kermode on 5 Live, and every year he does his own awards ceremony as a sort of antidote to the Oscars and says, well, here's the things that haven't even been nominated and deserve an award themselves. And I think at least once Andy Serkis has come up for this amazing stuff he's done with mocap that the Academy look at and they go, well, that's an effect, or whatever. They haven't got a box for it, so they can't really give it an award. Well, that's how it feels, anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree. But it will catch up that way, and it's put character. It's something. It's different. In the old days, you would have been put in prosthetics and a monster suit and asked to give a performance. Now you do that in a motion capture studio, but it's still you giving the performance.
Sorry to drag you away from that. It's just I'm aware that we pushed for time, and I just had a question that I've met for Janet and Michael. You both now work a lot for Big Finish in your respective things that you've done with as Tegan or as Villa. Are there any stories that you've always thought that you'd like to be told through your characters? Is there a Villa story that you've never heard?
Quite like to have explored some of his family, his auntie, for instance, something like Villa's auntie, based on my lovely late auntie from Newcastle upon Tyne. Would have been wonderful, but I don't know. I'll have to sort of go around.
That's good. No, it's just you've been working with Villa's dad a lot, particularly well.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if there was anything else that you thought in the back of your head when you were working on the character, we could do that, but yeah, the rest of his family is very... Anything Tegan based?
Funnily enough, I was going to say exactly the same thing, because which was I would be
An
interested in playing a relation, you know, and no, I other than that, not really. No, Delore Whiteman, who played my aunt, died 2 years ago. Yeah, I think it's 2 years ago. And it occurred to me, you know, that playing her sister might have been interesting, you know, or my own mother, or do you know what I mean? That sort of thing would intrigue me.
Well, Logopolis is one of my favourite Tom Baker stories, and I love all that stuff in the first few minutes with you and Aunt Vanessa and all that. That's could be taken straight out of something they'd make now. Because that's exactly how they would introduce a character now, and give them that sort of background and...
Yeah, but then they just abandoned it. It was like, once I got in there, you never heard me express grief.
The thinking is entirely different now, and it struck me when they brought the show back and I was watching it and liking it, but at the same time as a fan, analysing it furiously on some level as well, and I thought... Well, what they've done with Doctor Who is they've sort of grounded it. They've poured a lot of reality into it.
I like that because, you know, supposedly the Earth characters were meant to be the audience's way into a story. And I used to always think, well, you know, all that stuff. People complained at one point about the fact that she's always moaning about getting back to Heathrow. But in fact, it was the only outlet for grief that she had. And her anger about not getting back to Heathrow had to do with her anger at the fact that, thanks to the Doctor and his intergalactic shenanigans, she was responsible for the death of her... You know, he was responsible for the death of her aunt.
I'd have to entirely agree with you, because since they brought it back... I mean, I love the old show, but since they brought it back, it's become this thing you can emotionally hook into.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I love about the modern storytelling.
Sort of...
But I go back to the fact that when we were doing science fiction, it was in a half-hour format. And funny enough, there are some... I think drama works better in a half-hour format. But if you're doing an action thing, I think it needs longer, because you've got the action and you've got the character. I mean, basically what happened when you're doing 23 minutes... You come in, you start running, and you keep running.
Everything builds towards that.
And because it's exactly. Whereas what you want to do is you want to come down, you want to come back up, you come down, you come back up, and the more you're emotionally invested in the character, the more you care about the character. You know, and Peter and I were having this discussion the other day on the phone, Peter Davison and I was saying, I could not get into Game of Thrones. Now, I know I'm in the minority. I do understand that.
I've not even seen it.
The first couple of years of it are a little hard to watch, particularly if, like me, you stuck it on at 6:30 at night and you went, this isn't it.
Well, apart from the rampant sexism in it,
And
which
just the rampant sex.
Well, you will notice that it is, there isn't a woman in it under the age of 30 who doesn't take her clothes off. There's the fact that Peter said, I don't enjoy watching it because every time I like a character, I know they're going to die.
Yeah.
And that's like...
Well, so with Blake Seven, whoever came on as a guest one episode, we knew they were going to get killed off.
Yeah.
On a planet.
There was a rare exception of that, and I hope everybody's caught up with Game of Thrones, but...
Don't say it. Don't say it. No.
Just say someone.
There's at least one person they killed off, and I won't say who they were, who I thought, well, they deserved it. Because they were someone who you watched it and you weren't in love with them. They were the nasty person. I have to tell you afterwards who they were now.
Well, I don't care because I don't watch. It's just not my thing.
So you think the audience, rather than being guided through a narrative, is just being baited? And then moved. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also, I don't get what the values are that I'm meant to be endorsing as a viewer, because there's what's the ethical universe that I'm in?
It's not necessarily a show where the goodies win.
No, I get that. That's life, but it certainly is life.
Well, exactly.
Hello.
That's why we like fiction.
But what are the values I'm meant to be taking from it? And I just anyway, I just couldn't get into it. I just couldn't.
I think I'm a bit in love with the scenery in it, and the fact that whenever I put it on, there'll be a really good British actor in it, and they've had
nothing to do with people taking their clothes off. Then
no, I told you the first couple of years of it I couldn't watch properly.
But then you forced yourself, so it's fine.
Yeah, it got better for me when there was less, as I say, rampant sex in it. But
really, let's be honest here. There's a lot of soft porn.
First couple
there's a
of years,
big element of it. There's somebody putting their hand up. Did you know that?
Is there?
Oh well.
Does someone have a question?
Better hand over.
Is this you? Is this? What do you mean off?
It's the boss look busy.
I'm saying, it's not like do you feel like Game of Thrones is an exception? Do you feel like in a way that TV is even more sexist now than it was?
No, I don't. Generally speaking, I don't feel that. I feel that the roles for women are much better than they used to be, and more diverse. It's still got a long way to go. And it was interesting when I was an agent, and I it was quite a pucker agency. So I had people like Simon Callow, Paul McGann, and Bill Patterson, and we had a good female list as well. How I know Peter Capaldi so well while I was a mate was because I represented his wife, Elaine, and Elaine Collins, who's now director of creative whatever at the BBC, and anyway, the point about I've lost the point. Complete. Oh, about sex. The women on the list, although my female list wasn't nearly as long, there was a huge struggle for them to get work, and the number of roles that there were for them were tiny, tiny, tiny. And like in the 1980s in Doctor Who, it was amazing. You went round the universe, and wherever you went, even the aliens were stupid enough to leave men in charge. I mean, really. I cannot believe that an advanced civilization would be that stupid. Who knew?
They should have you in the new series.
Well, I must admit, I've just been waved at to say that I think we're over. So I just want to thank you all three of you very, very much for talking to us. Thank you very
I
much.
just would like to say Nick Briggs won't be as interesting.
Raise the bar now, Nick.
Yeah, we
gotta be
raised
really
the bar, darling, like really.
Our team at the pub quiz last night.
Oh, yes.
So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was the Doctor Who Tin Dog podcast, available on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, RSS, Vimeo, and across the internet. Doctor Who and its associated properties are all copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Why not become a supporter by visiting patreon.com/tindog. Contact the show on tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.